Good evening, everybody, and welcome inside Upon Further Review on another Wednesday night where we're entering week 7 of the high school football season here in Northeast Indiana. I'm Eric Dudkevich alongside the coach Shannon Griffith. Coach, good to be with you again tonight. I think if we jump right into it, what a wild Friday night across the board it was, from the game we were at with Snider and Homestead and the overtime thriller there to New Haven, Columbia City in the NE8. We had South Adams and Adams Central. Their always a big matchup down in Adams County with Adams Central dominating that game, and just Southside winning. I mean, just all across the board. Perhaps not things that we never saw that they could happen, but just a really wild night across the board, and they all happened at one time.
Well, I think that's what we got now in the Summit Athletic Conference and the NE8 and ACAC at this time of the year, where you can about bet that something crazy will happen, or you'll get the games that we've had over the last couple of weeks where touchdown separation, teams rising up to beat another team they weren't maybe supposed to beat. It makes it exciting from a fan's perspective, and from our perspective, covering it as we do, because there's so much talent in this area. It's not even funny. There's so many good football players in and out of this area that really make Friday nights something special.
Yeah, so looking forward to talking through a bunch of that tonight. On tap for our show, we'll have head coach Chad Zolman of the Homestead Spartans joining us here momentarily. Like we mentioned, a big win for the Spartans over Snider, coming back, rallying at home, forcing overtime, and then, of course, pulling out the 23-20 victory over the Snider Panthers. And wow, I mean, that was an old school rivalry, if you will, Coach. That is, Coach Griff, that has become a big one in the SAC, and really, like we talk about each and every week, lots of SAC implications in that one.
Yeah, and if you look at this, I mean, I'm going back to the score sheet that I do on the Friday night broadcast. I mean, it was 14-0 before you blinked an eye. And honestly, I was concerned at that point, was Homestead in the ball game, because at first I don't know what it was. They just didn't seem like themselves that you really expect from Homestead. And then all of a sudden, man, Swagger has a game. White makes great throws. Their defense rises up and makes big plays. The way they came back in that ball game will be something that they'll all talk about the rest of their lives. They'll talk about that game because of the things that they did to get to that point where now, in some respects, they control their destiny as it pertains to the SAC overall championship. But just a tremendous game that it was there. The interesting part was in that overtime period is Buchanan, Snider's leading rusher, didn't touch the football. They tried to go to Ganaway on a fade that barely missed. Then they tried a dive up the middle with Rohrbacher, got nothing. And then all of a sudden, you're third down, and you got to figure out a way to, see what you're going to do there. But Snider, Homestead did a great job. Their offensive line probably played the best that I have seen Homestead's offensive line play, because they had the inside zone running pretty good, and Fox was doing a good job of really selling it and then cutting it back, because Snider was over pursuing, and they were opening some big holes on the backside, and he was able to see it because he's such a talented kid. And that ultimately led to what we got on our Friday night was a great comeback and a great overtime win.
Yeah, and certainly a big one there, and it was a crazy game to be part of. And and Brett Fox, the big game for him, kind of leading the way. And we saw, and we'll ask Coach Zolman about this when he comes on soon. But Michael White gets knocked out of the game again, and we've talked about it week after week, the senior leadership of Brett Fox, the ability to come into the backfield and he really took over that game, especially that second half and into the overtime period, where it got to the point where Snider's defense was struggling to get him stopped and to get their defense off the field and all of that. So definitely a big game for him, and that led Homestead to victory.
No question. He had a great game. I think he had 167 yards. Michael White, only a sophomore. There's so much raw talent there that he can be a really good player. Get in the weight room, young man, because that's what you need right now. But just the whole game in itself, the number of kids that were in that ball game and made big plays and stuff, it was really a great game to see.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. Well, I think we can go ahead and bring on Coach Zolman now, who's waiting for us. He just joined us in, and we'll bring him in now. Coach, first of all, congrats on a big win Friday night against Snider. What an emotional game, an emotional victory for your team, and really an opportunity to get back on the winning track. Just talk about the resiliency of your group and what they were able to accomplish on Friday night.
Well, I think they played hard for about 3 out of 4 quarters because that first quarter they came out and it felt like we were sleepwalking. It was kind of strange, and you look up and we're down 14 and had given the ball back, and it didn't look good. And I think our offense sparked us with a nice drive and got us back into the game there. And down 7 is a lot different than down 14 without the ball. So I think that kind of woke us up a little bit. Honestly, when we watched film, the effort level that first quarter was kind of shocking to us all. We didn't start very well, and so that's part of the problem to begin with.
I sensed that in the broadcast that I just kind of said they just don't. Their body language wasn't good. Yeah. It was just one of those things that you just kind of notice that you're accustomed to seeing how your kids normally play. The body language that after those first 2 scores, I was like, wow, this could be ugly, to be quite honest. Yeah. But the resiliency that the kids showed, I mean, it was quite a thing to watch. I mean, because they could have folded their tents. Mm-hmm. I mean, the honest question there, down 14, they could have folded their tents. And I think in some respects, Snider just kind of got back on their heels then, because it is almost like, oh, we got them right where we want them.
Right.
And at that point, talk about Michael White's play at this point in time. As a true sophomore, I know that he's gotten dinged up the last couple games, and, I'm not sure if it's anything that's going to keep him out this week, but just kind of talk about his growth as a quarterback.
Well, if you look back at the beginning of the summer until now, you could watch film, you'd be shocked at the difference of how he's playing. And he handles the situation now better than he's ever has. And that's part of it. As a young quarterback, you've got to make sure that you can, in these fire situations like he was in these last couple of weeks, it's you got to be able to handle it, good and bad. And what we have seen maturity-wise has been the difference. I think if you look at some of the early games, he was a little hesitant on some things, and now he's making decisions quick. He's putting the ball in the right spot. He's delivering the ball to the right person. All the things that you want a quarterback to start doing, he's doing. And he had limited practices last week just because he was healing up a little bit, but that I think his performance was fantastic Friday night.
Well, no, he made some throws that I just kind of like, wow. I mean, he made a throw, I think, from the opposite hash to the opposite boundary on a dart, and I just thought, wow, I don't even know how he saw that receiver because he had a lot of traffic, but he just made some throws that, for a sophomore at least, he's progressed nicely, I guess you would say, in his growth and his game and things of that nature.
Yep.
I figured, you guys got to be feeling pretty confident now that you can, put some give him the chance to make the plays without, guarding against him, doing something stupid.
Yeah.
So,
when you're young, a lot of decision making, and it seems to slows down a little bit. And, but as he's in this will be game 7 this week. So he's had all this opportunity to grow. And I think the things that you need to see, he's seeing quicker, and they say the game slows down. I think your decision-making speeds up is what really happens. And I think that's what you're seeing with Michael. And he's got some physical tools to be special. And so, and Coach Skelton does a good job of developing those and requiring a lot of them and making sure that they're mentally where they need to be each week.
Coach Chad Zolman joining us here upon further review tonight. Coach, the season so far, you guys start 0-2, those tough losses, Carroll and then Noblesville, and then you jump into SAC play, and it kind of takes off from there and all of that. That time for you, people make a lot about the schedule of the new SAC and the out of conference games and the grind that you guys went through. What did that do for your team to play a team like Carroll and Noblesville as you got ready for SAC play?
Well, when you see those teams from Indy, I think some of the things that you see a lot of talent, but at the same time, you see a lot of size. And you see big kids up front. Carroll looked like a college offensive line. And, when you see that and you go battle well against those types of things, it benefits you well. And so I think it helps their confidence a little bit. Come away with 2 losses, it's never what you want or, what we're fighting for. I thought we played well game 1, and then with this young group, we played pretty poorly the second game, and they would agree. And if you watch film, it's like we were night and day difference in execution and of our game plan. And so one of the things I think that we took out of that and that we've progressively gotten a little bit better each week is just doing your job, and making sure that you're executing your job to the best of your ability on every play, and that's what we're trying to get these kids to do. And I think we've progressively gotten better and better at that. And we still are not perfect execution-wise. And I think, last week against Dwenger, we were 3 or 4 plays away from executing a little bit better. Maybe the outcome's a little better, and we're also 3 or 4 plays Friday night that we don't execute, and we're sitting here at 2 and 4, and so I think they're starting to understand the importance of every play and how hard they have to play on a Friday night to win. It's not easy to win. It's not easy to win in Indy. It's not easy to win here in the SAC. So I think that's part of it. And we've got a young squad generally, and I think they're learning that how the amount of effort and study and dedication each week it takes to be successful. I think that's one of the great lessons we learned.
Let's talk a little bit about your offensive line, because I know in the past that you may have not had the most physical or the biggest offensive line around, but it seems to me that your offensive line play's gotten better, especially Friday night. I thought they played the best that I had seen them play in a number of years. They were really sustaining the line of scrimmage for the most part, kept the pocket clean. And then of course, Fox made them right. As running backs have to make offensive linemen right. It's not as easy as just running the ball and expecting the lineman to blow everybody off the ball every time. But I thought he did a good job of making them right Friday.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned them, because I think they're the O-line and D-line are probably the strength of our team, and especially that offensive line. I think they, when we get a hat on a hat, we feel pretty good about our kids' ability to block. And I think Friday night they did that really well. And as you said, backs have to make them. You can't be dancing in the backfield, one cut and go. And Brett is a fantastic ability to do that. And so he does make his linemen look good. But up front, they put a ton of work in. And Coach Davis, our offensive line coach, does a great job prepping them every week and making sure their assignment's sound and making sure that their technique's proper and that he spends a lot of time on assignments and making sure that everything is sound that way. So all that paid off, and we've got some good physical, strong kids there. I mean, we've got, and that's probably the most senior dominant position group that we have. And so when you get seniors who are leading an offensive line, that makes a big difference. You got
Absolutely.
big kids who make good decisions, and when that happens up front, you're in good shape.
Sure. One of those seniors behind the offensive line, Brett Fox, just talk about his growth coming in and kind of really Friday night, kind of taking the game on his shoulders, the team on his shoulders, and really grinding out that victory. Talk about his growth, Coach, and what he's been able to do, and really how he's kind of made everybody around him better and continues to do so.
Well, he started for 3 years for us now, and he's been making plays for 3 years. And he dedicated himself in the weight room. And it's part of the reason I think he's obviously a lot of the reason he's so successful and so tough. I mean, he's had 28 carries and 27 carries the last two games against really good opponents. And that's a lot of carries, a lot of contact, and he's just durable. Now, he got nicked up a little bit at Dwinger and had limited practices last week, but as the practices progressed through the week, he got better and better. And Friday night, he was feeling 100%. And he's just a tough kid. He has the ability, and we as coaches we talk about this. Good backs don't make when they come to make a cut. It's not a large cut. It's not a hard right or a hard left. It's a slight left or a slight right, and he moves his hips. And when he does that, he has the ability to take away angles, and he knows how to. Just that there's some natural ability there for running backs that he has, and his ability to go from 0 to 60 fairly quickly is impressive too. Because when he finds a spot, he'll squeeze through it and he'll get through there in a hurry. So he's fun for us to watch in practice and in games. And he's carried us obviously, and we feel like if we can run the ball on you and be successful doing that, we're going to ride that horse, and he loves it.
Well, he's so dynamic, and just like you said, the one thing that he does the best that I think is when you talked about his cutting there for a second, his cuts are, like you said, a pressure step and vertical. He's not, cross fielding it or anything like that. He's getting vertical as fast as he could. Matter of fact, he almost overran the hole in the overtime that he ended up getting in on because he really pressured it too far right and almost missed the cut. Almost missed that cut that, a pretty big hole there. But, talk about that overtime period. And let's expand this a little bit. Your relationship with Kurt Tittman. I kind of saw, both of you are out for the overtime toss. And, I think at the end you go with both kind of high-fived each other, and I kind of sense that there's a mutual respect and friendship there that goes beyond the field.
Yeah, I count him as a good friend, and we respect each other's programs. We scrimmage them every summer, at the beginning of the season, and we do that because we know we'll get a quality opponent who's going to play hard and expose our weaknesses, but at the same time, it won't get ugly ever because he makes sure his kids are playing the right way, and we try to do the same thing. And so there's a mutual. Yeah, you're right. When we went out for that overtime, we talked a little bit, and then he said, "Let's go," and gave me a high five, and then it was pretty fun.
Well, he's a class act, and as are you. The programs that you both run, top notch. Your kids are respected. Respect the game of football and the way they play it, as does your staffs. And it's good to see that camaraderie in a game that is a physical game. I mean, you don't let things spill out beyond the white lines. That's the way I always, coach. In between the white lines, everybody's trying to beat everybody. That's the game of football. Outside of it, you want to make sure that everything stays inside those lines. And I think that's one good thing that I see with a lot of coaching in the Summit City is the respect for each team that's on display on Friday nights.
Yep. And there's emotion in football, and kids get hot and you got to reel them in a little bit, but you're right. There's a line that you don't cross, and that and we try to make sure our kids know that where that line is. And you're right to respect the game for what it is. It's a fantastic game. If it's played right, it was like Friday night. We feel like that was a hard-fought, physical football game that was enjoyable and through 4 quarters plus.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Coach. Another big one. Now you move on to next Friday with Carroll. You guys make the trip up north to Carroll. SAC implications on the line again with everybody in that North Division now sitting at 3-1, except for Northrop. Certainly some implications on the line where these matchups within the division, even though it's an overall record, really carry a lot of weight, and that's where we are at Week 7. Now turning the page, going from Snider to Carroll, just what that looks like for you now and what you have in front of you coming up this week.
Well, it doesn't get any easier, right? This is a really good football team that we're looking at and studying. In fact, we're at a staff meeting tonight and talking about them. And the implications, every game that you win, the next one becomes a little bit bigger and more important. So that's where we're at. And I think that when you look at this matchup, it's going to be a tough one. I mean, they've got talent everywhere on offense and on defense, and they're well coached and disciplined, and special teams are solid. They've got a good kicker. They're a very good football team. So for us to be successful, I mean, we've got to play really, really well and play really, really hard for 4 quarters, I think, and try to come out a little faster than we did last week.
Yeah, in playing there is always a tough thing too, just because everybody, home field advantage and all, and they have great support like Homestead does on Friday nights, and it's going to be another good football game, I believe. And I think one thing that's got the talk of the town maybe and has since the beginning of the season is the 2 divisions, that we've kind of labeled Division A and Division B. And, Bishop Lures, here's a team that started 0-3, and most years they would have been thought of, well, they're just playing now to get themselves ready for the sectionals, so to speak. Well, in theory, they essentially control their own destiny moving out because they got the Battle of the Bishops, of course. That's a big rivalry game. And then I think they play Southside. And then, of course, you guys going in that last week could be potentially for all the marbles, I guess. What's your thoughts on this setup with the 2 divisions, and you take a Lures team now that ultimately, if they win out, they essentially become the SAC championships, but they haven't played or will not play Snider or Carroll this year?
That's a good question. I
didn't mean to put you on the spot.
We've got to figure that out and evaluate and see if it's the proper way to do it, and to make sure that it's all fair and in all aspects. But yeah, you're right. I don't know. We'll see how it pans out.
I know you coaches don't think about that stuff right now. I mean,
trying to figure out how to beat Carroll right now.
You're figuring out how to get a first down against Carroll, and I respect that. So that question probably is a little bit unfair, but being that I'm on the other side of the fence now, I guess it has to be asked in some respects. But yeah, I think that's the question when it all comes down to it. I personally kind of like the divisions. I really do, in the sense that it does create some equality in the divisions. Again, what may or may not happen in 3 or 4 weeks is really no sense of talking about it till you get there. But it's just an interesting dynamic that I kind of wanted to get your take on it, since really nobody's really talked about it. It was just kind of put out there that this is the way it was going to be. And I think we've had different versions of what counts, what doesn't count. And then on top of that, how do you figure out who's the SAC champ? And, that's kind of the reason why I think it's been a topic of discussion here of late.
Yeah. To be honest, I hadn't thought about it personally, how this is all going to plan out till we got in the middle of it and thinking, okay, with all these different scenarios, how could it play out? And I think honestly, it would probably be good for us once this is played out for this year, and reevaluate it and see the best way to determine a champion from here on out. But I don't know. I mean, maybe we're just fine and everybody's going to agree they should be champ, or whoever it is a champ, and it won't be a problem. But I think a little more structure and clarity on the process, I think, is probably needed for the future, because we hadn't thought about it much until we started the season, right? So
whose idea was it to go into this 2-divisional setup? Was that coach's input, or was that more of the ADs? This is what we need to do, or how was that all constructed?
The coaches pushed it, and the main reason, honestly, was to get 2 out-of-conference games if we could, and that was the push. And there's a number of reasons. One of them is it's always been nice to have. And when we were in NHC, we had 2 out-of-conference to begin the season, and it was nice because you could kind of gauge how you play against other teams in different regions and things like that. And it helped. Not that the Sagarin ratings you get some input on, but how they play, and it kind of, if you're not playing someone out of conference, it can, it kind of hurts you a little bit there too. And then we thought, there is a difference in school sizes and school roster sizes and
absolutely
things like that. And for fairness, it might be beneficial to do something like this. And so we all came to a mutual agreement that we thought would be a good idea. And then we took it to the ADs and they voted on it and thought it would be good too.
I don't think it's bad. I think it's understood. And the standpoint is, you got teams from 6A to 2A, I guess you could say, and there's a difference between those type of programs. Yeah. It has benefited the Dwangers and the Lures and the Concordias over the years because they play stiff competition and then they get into the tournament and they're battle tested, for the most part by playing the better team. So it was just a question that I think we've pondered, especially Doot and I over the last couple of weeks, and heard different, I guess, scenarios. I always thought, man, give up one of the non-conference games, play your, 9 games or so, or whatever it is, 8 or so. And then at the end of that, you could play 1 versus 2, 3 versus 4, 5 versus 6. And you have kind of a semi-championship game that's played, with some, I guess, stuff on the line, maybe.
Yeah.
That was discussed. That scenario was discussed at one point. And there was some, I can't recall how the meetings went, but there was some discussion and we decided not to do that. But and I think it was mainly for stability of having 2 non-conference, if you want to,
right.
If you want 2 out-of-conference games, then, we had to do something different. But
I just thought I'd throw my 2 cents in there.
Yeah. Right. Well, it's been interesting. And I think the point is it's a new thing. I think there certainly will be evaluation at season's end to see kind of how it works. But I think by and large, like we said, we're at week 7 and there's still a lot of teams that have a lot to play for that they're not sitting around until sectionals to play ahead. And obviously the big one this week for us on 1380 will be Homestead at Carroll, and our 1380 game of the week will be out at Carroll for that game. And Coach, I know that's a big one for you and a lot of prep this week and getting ready for that. And you guys can still have a say in what happens in the SAC race just by continuing to play well. And so we thank you so much for coming on this week, Coach Chad Zolman, the head coach of the Homestead Spartans. Best of luck on Friday night, and we'll see you later on in the season.
All right. Appreciate you guys having me. Thanks for what you do for high school football. We appreciate it.
All right, Coach. Have a good one.
Thanks so much. Well, there you go, Coach. We finally get coaches on the record when it comes to this
stuff.
Right. And I mean, and we did kind of put Coach Zolman on the spot, and he's a good sport. He's been on our show before, but I think therein lies a lot of it because we have heard so many different things with the SAC standings, everything from the fact that what are the divisions and how did they come up with them? And I've heard athletic directors tell me who were in those meetings that there was no such things as divisions when they started all of this, that it kind of became that. But the press release that came out at the beginning before this a year ago named him. Now, that was a Fort Wayne Community Schools press release from the commissioner at the time, who was the then Southside principal, now Northrop principal. But nevertheless, I think what we're seeing bear out is that the competition is a little bit more concentrated, where you have the perennial powers and Carroll, Snider, Dwanger, Homestead play each other every year. And then they're going to have kind of a rotation to fill those other games between teams of that other division. So, no, we're not seeing Snider and Northside this year or next year. I think it's a 2-year schedule.
Yeah, right.
But and we're not seeing, what do we say, Lures and Carroll. But in 2 years, we might
Carroll,
see
Snider.
Lures and Carroll and Snider and Northrop, but we might not get Homestead and Lures, or it's a different thing, or Homestead and Wayne. And so I think that's kind of what the goal was. I think it's by and large worked, and to an extent, after midway through season 1, just from the sheer fact that, man, if you look at the SAC schedule and the standings, everybody in the A division except for Northrop is at 3-1, and everybody, and then the B division, you have Lures and Northside. So, by and large, Northside might be out of it at this point. But Lures and with the games that they have coming up, and, the big one still, Dwanger's still got to play Snider. Homestead has still got to play Carroll this weekend.
And then Lures.
The battle of the bishops this weekend, where that's a cross divisional game, so to speak, that does count. Because we've even heard people say, "Oh, it's only the games in the division that counts," which is not either. Then you throw in the fact that Northrop and Wayne played each other out of conference because neither team could find that second game. So it counted in the regular season standings, but didn't count it. But anyway, so a lot to be made. But I think overall, from my perspective, it's been good, because we're sitting at week 7 and the SAC isn't decided yet.
Right. And I think, this whole thing was done, and I think Chad, put it out like the coaches wanted. They wanted to play 2 non-conference games.
Yeah. That's probably the big point of it.
That was the biggest point. It had nothing to do with the Summit Athletic Conference at that point. It was talking about, how can we play 2 non-conference games and not just go right in from week 1, where every game counts for the Summit Athletic Conference. Okay. That's good. I agree with that. But it will cause some problems if you get a scenario where a team could go, 7-0 or whatever that mark is, but not play somebody like Carroll or Snider or even Homestead in that regard, and get the championship. And then you're going to have teams that are the 1-loss teams. They're going to be thinking, well, wait a minute, I know if we play them, blah, blah, blah. Right. So it is what it is. You can't have it both ways. And that's going to be the thing. And that's why I was surprised when they did this, that they said, okay, let's go 1 non-conference game. Let's hold a game. So at the end of the year, we play one versus 2, 3 versus 4, 5, kind of a semi-championship game that, has some meaning to it prior to going into the playoffs and stuff. But again, it is so complicated in football when you only have X amount of games. Look at it. We've played 6 games and we're already beyond the halfway point of the season.
Yeah.
It's crazy. You're thinking we just started, and all of a sudden we're what, 3 weeks out from the sectional starting.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to think that we're that far along already in this season. But, it is what it is. It's the SAC, like you said. There's meaningful games being played this week and next week that are going to go a long way to determine what happens as it pertains to the Summit Athletic Conference. And it all could come down to Lures and Homestead that final week of the season. That's what it could come down to. And that would be a great way to see it end in that standpoint, because it would clarify the overall picture, but it would also show that that divisional concept would work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just because of, it helps in that way. But we've had some who would have thought, Wayne would only lose by 7 to Carroll.
Right.
I mean, you got a game there at 17-10, I believe the final score was. And I was kind of shocked by that. I wasn't shocked by Lures beating Northside.
No.
I mean, I knew it would be a tough game, and Northside has, a ton of great athletes on the field, but I just felt, Lures is that team now that's got that belief that they're going to win every game they play. But the Wayne Carroll game was the one that surprised me the most, that it was a 7-point ball game, just because Wayne had struggled with, more or less, like you said in the pregame, it was a fumbling thing more so than anything else. It was that they were giving up the ball quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way Carroll had been scoring so much earlier in the season, to see a 17-10 battle like that, especially off the heels of Snider and Carroll being a close one in the 20s.
Right.
Homestead and Snider go into the 20s when Snider had been really scoring high. And I think, and then on top of it, we cannot forget the Southside Archers. Right. I mean, first win for Andre Goodwill as head coach, first win in 22 games. They snapped the 22-game skid. I think Tori Curry, their athletic director, tweeted out first win at Zolman Stadium since 2012. So it's, at the end of the day, I called that upset. I'm not like taking credit or anything. And that's what I said. I said, those kids get the credit. And, I try to throw in an upset in there. I mean, I easily could have picked Concordia to beat Southside. And whoever's playing Southside, it's easy to pick that team each week.
Sure.
But I think, there again, there's still something to play for. And when you have two teams in this particular case who were winless overall, winless in the conference, in the same division, giving up lots of points on defense, and just to see the offensive production from Southside last Friday night, it's pretty cool. And you realize too, these are freshmen doing it on top of it for Southside.
Right.
When you have KJ Alexander's quarterback, and I think the running back who had a great game, Javon, I believe is his first name, and the last name's escaping me. I'll look that up here in a sec. But these are kids that are coming into the program, and now all of a sudden they have that next step of belief in themselves, and that not all is lost. And I think that's what's huge for a team like Southside right now.
Well, and it's good to see Coach Goodwill get that monkey off his back, and the kids get their reward for the work that they've put in. It's tough when you're getting those losing streaks because over time, it just becomes part of your DNA, and it becomes a very difficult thing to shed. But now that they've done that and got the reward, who knows what could happen? They could just latch on here the last few weeks of the year and, do some good things. But it's good to see that in that regard. But the SAC is a long way from over. But how about the NE8 too? I mean, we knew the New Haven Columbia City game was going to be a game that was going to end up being a pretty good marker for the season in terms of the NE8 title. And Columbia City was a team that had given New Haven some fits over the last few years. But New Haven finally got it done, but they needed 15 points in the fourth quarter to get it done. So it was a 7-6 ball game coming out of halftime into the third quarter. Columbia City was up, and let's see here. New Haven scored. I'm trying to see it here.
15 points in the fourth quarter.
Right. I was trying to see when the last one was done. But anyway, Columbia City's defense did a great job in terms of kind of keeping Williams intact, in check. He only had 60 yards passing on the night. Now they had 101 yards rushing. But when you think about it, I don't even know if Mylan Graham, he wasn't even in the stats, so he may not have played in the game. He may have been hurt or something, but
Yeah,
I
he
guess
was
he
in
did
there.
play. He got
I pulled
19
up. I was
rushes.
able to find it on Huddle. So
Yeah,
I know that's the other thing. That's the next question we needed to ask these
yeah.
coaches. By the way, what stats provider do you provide? Because that becomes we were kind of joking about that off air on
Yeah.
Friday night. But anyway, yes, Donovan Williams, 70 yards passing, a touchdown pass, an interception. But Trey Bates really was the story for New
Right.
Haven, 150 yards on 15 rushes with 2 TDs. He gets the to go back to the scoring, 7-6 at half, no scoring in the third quarter. Then a Johnny Washington gets the pass from Williams, and then Trey
That's
Bates
right.
60-yard run to seal the deal. And really in that NE8 game between New Haven and Columbia City, here's two teams that were scoring in the 40s and their defense were looking really solid. So this really became a defensive battle with scores late and all of that. James Hardy, the fourth, leading the way on the defensive side of the ball with tackles.
He's really gotten better.
And then, of course, Johnny Washington gets the interception on defense in addition to his touchdown on offense. So, and a fumble recovery. So 3 turnovers for Columbia City, 2 interceptions and a fumble, and also 2 for New Haven. So, but that's the big game mentality, is that you're not going to score 45 points on everybody. And these two teams have been doing that to that point, but that becomes a whole new level of pressure. What you can do when it's 7-6 heading into the fourth quarter of a game that ultimately you have 2 undefeated teams that could decide the NE8 championship at the end of the year.
Before I forget, we had him on last week. The catch that Stratton Fuller made in the end zone. If you haven't seen it, just go on Twitter or X now. But he made an unbelievable grab. I think Cohn's got it on his Twitter page, if I'm not mistaken. And you may be able to find it. But
the one-handed catch there.
Oh my gosh!
Summit City Sports. Let's see if I can pull it up here on my screen.
Yeah, let's show this because this was just an unbelievable effort in one-handed grab in the end zone that he made. Yeah, that's probably at the end of it.
Yeah, let me dial it up here again from Summit. Our friends at Summit City Sports.
Center on 4th down, looking for the lob into the end zone for Fuller.
Oh yeah.
And does he make the one-hand grab? That's it. That's a touchdown.
So he lays out.
Did he make the one-hand grab? Yes, he did.
We can rewind it again. We'll roll it through. But yeah, just a nice touch on the ball from Bradbury. Stratton just and with the left hand too. I don't know if Stratton's lefty or righty. He just pitched to the ref with his right hand, so I'm guessing he's righty. So on top of it, going away with the coverage on top of him, the ability to make that catch with the left hand and lay out for it with the defender kind of all over him. It looks like there was that penalty flag too, so he would have gotten the pass interference. So yeah, I mean, that's the kind of stuff in those big types of nights, that's what it becomes, is because big players doing big things and yeah, ultimately Columbia City wins that or goes down, falls in that game. But Stratton Fuller, a really solid a kid, and what he's been able to do for that Columbia City team. And it's not over yet. And if I remember correctly, they might even be in the same sectional. I think.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, because
and I think now Dwanger was added to that. We talk about the SAC schedule. This is kind of going down the rabbit hole a little bit, but how are they going to change the sectionals and what class somebody is in week 2, like they did with Dwanger? But anyway,
I don't know.
So Dwanger is now in class 4A, and I believe they're in that sectional with New Haven, Columbia City, sectional 19.
Yeah.
New Haven, Leo, East Noble, Dwanger. You can throw DeKalb in there if you so choose. And, of course, Angola. You never can count them out either. Wayne is in there. And Southside. Good old Southside draws that straw, too. God love them. But, I think
The best thing about the NE8 this week is coming up in 2 weeks. Now I misspoke because I thought we were going to do the New Haven East Noble game this week on the radio.
Right.
It's not this week, it's next week because we're going to do the Homestead Carroll game. But we'll be there for that game, and that will have big implications potentially on it because I think East Noble plays at Columbia City Friday night. So there will be a huge game for East Noble there. And for Columbia City, for that matter of fact. But again, the NE8 is kind of matching a little bit the Summit Athletic Conference in terms of continuity and competitive balance that we've seen over the last 2 weeks. So it's another one of those conferences that's got really good players. You're getting really good games, coaches, real good coaches in terms of what they do and how they do it. And I know New Haven's probably breathing a little bit of sigh of relief because Columbia City's been a thorn in their side for the last 2 years. They're the ones that always seem to be the team that kind of started the downward turn to 500 for New Haven over the last few years. But there's some big games there as well. And then what can you say about the ACAC, Adams Central? I mean, these guys are unbelievable. I mean, they're just one of those teams that just keeps on reloading. I don't think they ever have a bad year.
No.
And Keegan Bloom, is it Bloom, right?
Yeah, Keegan Bloom is a running back.
Yeah, he's a phenomenal football player in what they do. And a lot of those kids go both ways now. So you know how that is intermixed into the thing, all of it as well. But you know, I think that the best shot at him now is Bluffton. And I wouldn't have thought that at the beginning of the year. I thought it was going to be, my personal choice was going to be Heritage. I thought this was going to be Heritage's year to break through and topple Adams Central. Well, that didn't come to fruition. So, but there's a big game this week for Bluffton. They play at Heritage. That's going to carry huge implications as it goes forward. And they must play Adams Central and Bluffton must play what, the latter part of the schedule again? Would that be a final week game?
Yes, Bluffton hosts Adams Central on October 6th.
Wow. That's going to be huge either way.
Yeah, that is so for Bluffton, that's their final ACAC game because the way the ACAC is set up, Coach, it's because of the odd number of games, you know, it's a rotating out of conference game for the year. Heritage had LaPel last week. I think South Adams played Monroe Central a few weeks back. So the last game of the season, for regular season for Bluffton, is Lakeland. So that October 6th matchup with Adams Central is basically will probably amount to the ACAC championship. Adams Central's they played Garrett, Eastside, and Blackhawk Christian out the bat, and so they go all the way through with their ACAC games. They'll have spells this weekend, which that will probably be ugly early. Then at Bluffton, and then finishing off with Woodland for the regular season. So yeah, and Adams Central, one of those teams. If you go back, they have it. Last 10 years, they're like second. In the state and in their win-loss record, just in of a total combined 10 years, the same 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. So really what Coach Michael Moser has been able to do out there 15 years now, 133 wins, is just continue to grind.
Crazy
team, back-to-back shutouts, and that was South Adams and Heritage. So that was 86-0 combined score for Adams Central over South Adams and Heritage. Now they go to Southern Wells, which has struggled in the last couple of years, and heading to that Bluffton part of it too. So I think for these teams, it's one of those things where a lot is on the line. It's the way the schedule has worked out. It's been able to, you know, these two teams will meet in the last game of the basically last ACAC game of the year for both of those squads, and it should be a good one in that regard because that's how things work with their scheduling and the NE8. It's just every week there again is another big game. East Noble and Columbia City this week. Next week we'll have East Noble and New Haven. That will be our 1380 game of the week then. And really, I mean, we always talk about it. We look at the schedule each week and go, man, we could go to that game, or man, we could go to that game. I mean, there's probably like 3 or 4 each week between the SAC, the NE8, ACAC, and sometimes you can even sprinkle in the NECC where you could make the argument for game of the week. And it's hard to go everywhere, and there are limitations at certain schools just by virtue of location and press box space. But that's what's great about it too, is that ultimately, the kids are getting the attention, the games are getting the hype that they deserve, and ultimately, at the end of the Friday nights, these kids are really showing out, and it's fun to watch.
Well, absolutely. And then I guess my last question here, and then we can move on to the basically next week games and stuff like that. But I think the good question now is, I mean, can Lures win out? I mean, can they, run the gauntlet here the last couple of weeks? The Dwenger game this week, and then of course the final game against Homestead. And I haven't seen him play, so I can't, say this or that, but I just think what I've seen them do on paper and who they've beaten the last few weeks, I really think they've got a great chance to really get it done. You can see some of the scores as they've after their first, two losses of the season, where they got handled pretty easily by some of the NE8 teams. They've just now come on and, done some good things here the last few weeks. Now, I know some people are going to point out that they really haven't, outside of New Haven, played anybody prior to the North game. And I don't think many people thought they were going to win that game, but they did. Yeah. They battled and they did what they needed to win, which showed me a lot from the standpoint of their belief in what they're at right now. And we talked about it earlier in the year. Give Kyle Lindsley a couple weeks to determine what his team can do and not do, and emphasize that. And that's what they've done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, realistically, they're in that B division, which they're a 2A school anyway. They're I would make the argument, if we're going to evaluate it, switch Northrop and Lure. Well, you could say, do you switch Northrop and Lures or Northrop and Northside? Probably from a historical perspective, you put Northrop in the Lures in the A division, because they've had sustained success longer than a Northside. But Northside is, bigger, but a lot bigger. But anyway, so is Northrop. But anyway, Lures, that's who they've played. They've gotten the luxury of being in that division and then their crossover games have been Northrop, and then they'll play Dwenger this weekend, and then Homestead to close out the year. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, they benefit from being able to play Southside in there, and all of that, the Calhoun Street Brawl. But I think what's been impressive to me about Lures is 2 weeks ago too, when they put a goose egg up on the board for Concordia, and they shut out Concordia, a team that could move the ball, score a lot of points, could not win, has not won, which was really baffling to me.
Right.
The 289 yards of passing offense and 6 touchdowns in a game, but you can't get a win, which shows me the defense for Concordia. But Lures, the ability to shut them out and then go into Chambers Field last Friday night and knock off the Northside Legends in a really hot, contested game.
Yeah.
I think coming out of that, by the way, as best I understand it, Coach, So Tay Johnson gets 2 unsportsmanlike conduct penalties, gets ejected from the game. I believe IHSA rules are, by the way, if you get ejected from a game, you miss the following game. So my understanding, as of reading the rule book leading into week 7, I don't think Tay Johnson will be playing for Northside this week when they play. Who do they got? They have Southside. Yeah. So it is the totem pole game this weekend.
Right.
But nevertheless, that was a very emotional game there. Lures comes out on top. Lures sits now at 4-0 in the SAC, and it is the combined overall record of the 7 games that decides that conference.
If you look at their schedule, though, at the beginning of the year, right?
Yeah.
And not knowing what we know now, you would say they're playing a pretty tough schedule when you look at the crossover games. They've got Northside, they've got Dwenger, and they got Homestead.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm using that based upon what we knew from Northside a year ago and the year they had. So you look at that from a Lures perspective, that's a pretty tough schedule on top of playing 2 of the top NEA teams with East Noble and New Haven.
Yeah.
So to sit here and say they haven't played anybody, I'm not sure that's a truther at all. I think they've played a pretty tough schedule. When you
realistically, they're playing somebody is yes, it's the last. It's 2 of the last 3 games of the season. Really, 3 of the last 4. With Northside in there as well. So this is where it really. I mean, because theoretically, Lures could be 5, 6, 7-0. They could run the table. Or theoretically, they could lose their next 2 of their next 3, and be 4 and what is that? And then fit 7, so they would be 5-2, and they would not probably win the SAC then.
No, and that's a legitimate observation as it pertains to what they have in front of them.
Yeah,
they're going to have a tough game against Dwenger. That game, throw out the records, because it has no bearing on that game. It's a very emotional game because it's the 2 top Catholic schools here in the Summit City, programs that have storied traditions behind them and some great players over the years that have played in that game. I can just think of a few off the top of my head, Jalen Smith, and you got Thomas Hammock, who's the head coach at Northern Illinois now. Yeah. But there's been some great players in this game that have played, and it's gonna be a good contest. That's another game we could go do. The Dwenger, just from the standpoint of it being such a traditional rivalry game, it makes it one of those attractive games. But
itself into a big time game. But I mean, there's a lot, and we probably can go ahead now, Coach, and look at the other games on the schedule. We just talked about Dwenger Lures, Battle of the Bishops for the Mitre Trophy. The mitre being what the bishops wear on their hat, on their head out there. The bishop's hat. That's always a fun game with that. And then we got the Totem Pole game, the longest standing rivalry in Fort Wayne with Northside and Southside over Southside's over 100 years old. Northside's getting there, but I think this rivalry, and I don't have all the paperwork in front of me. I'll have it for Friday night, but this is in the neighborhood, I think, of probably 95 or 96 meetings between the 2 schools, and especially the dynamic of where Northside has struggled and the emotion of things and all that. And then Southside, the emotional win. Yes, it's going to be tough for Southside to come back and beat a team like Northside at home, but every little bit of confidence helps. Anything's possible. If Tay Johnson's not playing, it completely changes it, because you go back to what Northside had before and some of their personnel. But anyway, so that's a big game.
It's #rivalry week.
#rivalry week. Yeah. We have Northrop and Snider out at the Battle of Spooler Stadium. I think it's probably like 25 games in a row for Snider. Now, last time Northrop beat Snider was the sectional semifinal 1999. I do remember that's the
Yeah.
game there.
It wasn't from 82 to 85, 86. I'll say that right now.
That's true.
They beat us both times.
Yeah.
They had those years. They had some great teams, though.
Well, yeah, and that was a different era for Northrop as well. By the way, Northrop now sitting at 14-game losing streak, the longest in school history for them. And dating back to 09 and through 10 was at 13 games. It's been a while for them. And then Concordia and Wayne. Concordia still looking for its first win of the year. Wayne, I think Wayne has turned out to be more of that. I don't want to say a typical Wayne probably sounds a little bit strong, but more. I think Wayne has been somewhere there was high hopes in the beginning and then it kind of faded. They won 2 straight off the bat and now they're 1-3 since. Of course, losses to Lures and Carroll in there and Homestead. So their schedule, but the rest of their schedule will be Concordia, Northside, and Snider. So winnable games for Wayne.
Don't count them out
and especially what they were able to do against Carroll a week ago. Certainly can't count them out for what they can do. And then, of course, the big one, Homestead and Carroll, coach. Another game that could go a long way in deciding the SAC. Both teams in the A division, the bigger schools, the newest schools in the SAC, battling it out at Gorsuch Athletic Complex. And this should be a fun one. 2 physical defenses. A high flying offense for Carroll, and then of course the run game for Homestead is picked up. That's helped Michael White, and I think that begs the question: is what do we see from that sophomore quarterback, and then of course how Brett Fox can kind of make everything even keel.
Well, Carroll, for whatever reason, this year has struggled to run the football. And I think it was even evident on Friday against Wayne. And it's kept them in a one-dimensional mindset because of Jimmy Sullivan and what he brings to the table. But he hasn't had the year that he had a year ago, and that's partly because of their inability to run the football. They're going to have to, again, they've got to find some semblance of a running game, whatever that is, however they develop that. If they can get that done, they are a really good football team minus the running game. That's what's hurt them all year. Why that is? Sometimes it is what it is. I mean, it boggles my mind a little bit because they were so good last year with basically the same group. Now, what changed is some offensive linemen up front, but Starks was there, as you know, a lot of this was there. So, it's going to be a heck of a game. Can Homestead carry on the running, like you said, of Brett Fox and what they were able to do against a defense like Snider's now? And they are pretty good, good defense. So if Homestead can carry that momentum into this game against Carroll, they'll have a good chance of winning it on the fact that they'll be able to run the football some. Now, I don't think White's going to be out. I don't think Chad tipped his hand one way or the other, but I don't think his injury was that bad. I think they just kept him out because they felt they could get it done without him. But, his play has gotten better. If they don't turn the ball over and can do some of the things that they've been doing, they got a good chance. And Swaggart's come on for them on the outside. And I'm just really impressed with how Homestead has developed throughout the season to where they're at now. We saw them against Carmel. Okay. That game was okay. They played them tougher than what I thought we said. But when they went back down to Indianapolis, the next week was Westfield. And Westfield kind of handed them their lunch. I was like, oh, I don't know about Homestead then. But this will be a classic rivalry game. There'll be big crowds. Neon Nation will be huge, as they always are. Probably I'd labeled Neon Nation and Homestead's fanatics there are probably one of the two best student sections. And I would have to say Snider's right in there too now.
Don't throw
I think
I think is what they call themselves.
I think Neon Nation raised it up, and I think these other schools are now. It's becoming a pretty good competition, which I love to see.
Too.
Absolutely, I love to see it. We had a great atmosphere the last 2 weeks. You know, at Spooler, we had I don't think there was a seat on any side that was available for that game. Yeah. And then this week's game as well was a top-notch game. But excited to get out there and see that game. We're getting a little winded here. We'll have the pregame out there again. You, Doot, myself, and Jim Shevlin will be on the air at 6 o'clock. If you come early, stop on by, say hello. And then, of course, after the game, you can catch Brett Rump and Adam Lundy at the Pine Valley Pizza Hut for the post-game show. Over there, they had a good crowd a couple weeks ago there at the show, so that's much appreciated as well. And then, of course, we'll have all the game action at 7 o'clock on 1380 The Fan 100.9. I'll join Brett Rump up in the booth there at Carroll High School. Last couple things here, dude. Just you can subscribe on YouTube. Give us a like there, a subscription on that will help us greatly. As plus notify bell, and then follow us on X, which was formerly known as Twitter, and Facebook, and then of course on podcasts. If you go to Apple, please leave us a review. It helps again us as we chug along on this journey with Upon Further Review. But for my man Eric Doot Dukevich, I am the coach Shannon Griffith. We will catch you Friday night from Carroll High School for the Homestead Spartans versus the Carroll Chargers, all on 1380 The Fan 100.9 FM. Have a good night, everybody.